Welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today in the show, we have Paula Rochon. She is a geriatrician, and her Kevin MD article is titled Reduce Your Loneliness, Improve Your Well-Being, and Take the First Step. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We'll get into the article in a little bit. First off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
I'm a geriatrician and health services researcher, and I think I got interested in the whole area of aging, probably in part related to my parents and grandparents. My grandparents lived really long and healthy lives. In fact, my grandfather lived to about 103, and I realized that not everyone was living that same kind of way. And that really influenced me to go into geriatric medicine, to think about aging and thinking about how you could promote health and well-being with aging. And over time, as a geriatrician, you see a lot of older people who are often women. And I became very aware of some of the unique needs of older women and how we ought to be thinking about them, and often aren't, and some of the inequities that they experience. So that led to me very recently founding a new research center called Women's Age Lab, which is focusing on learning about older women. So from a science perspective, figuring out how do you put things into action and how do you talk about it so that we can raise awareness about some of these issues. So that's my background.
So go into more detail in that. What are some of the specific challenges that older women
They face challenges, I would say, potentially from a medical perspective, but also they have challenges that are perhaps unique from a social perspective. So for example, from a medical perspective, they tend to live longer than men. That's a good sort of thing. But another piece is they experience more chronic conditions, and often not just a single chronic condition, but multiple chronic conditions. So that's something that we potentially have to think about how to deal with. It relates to medications, use of appropriate medications, how should medications be given to women, a lot of issues that come up there that I think we can do a lot better with. There's also, I think, important social issues. And one of the ones that I think has become super important and that we're much more aware of now during the COVID era has been the whole issue around loneliness. And older adults, especially women, experience loneliness. Women are more likely than men to live alone. They often outlive a spouse. And it's said that about 40% of those people that live alone are lonely. And loneliness impacts your health in a big way. People have said it's smoking a lot of cigarettes. So there's so many issues related to differences between older women and men that just haven't had the attention that they need. And so trying to make sure we look at that in everything we do.
So I'm a primary care physician, and I see a lot of older women in my clinic. And you mentioned loneliness being one of the major issues that they face. So in my primary care practice, in the exam room, what are some of the things that I can do to address this?
I think one of the things that we don't really do is we don't ask about it. We don't ask people about how they're doing, or just simple things like who are they connecting with? What is their social network? So I think it's important to start asking those questions. And once you have, then I think there's opportunities to find ways to potentially intervene. People talk about the idea about it's not just about prescribing medicines, which I'm sure everyone's well aware, but it's also about what else there might be available. What are some of the programs that are available in the local area that they might be interested in? What are potentially volunteer activities? What are some of the ways that people can be engaged and take advantage of the skills that they have? Which gets into what we're going to talk about a bit later on, like activities, importance of activities that people can do themselves or with others, depending on their interests, like walking.
All right, let's talk about your Kevin MD article. It's titled Reduce Your Loneliness, Improve Your Well-Being, and Take the First Step. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, just walk my audience through it. Share the story why you decided to write.
This article is really about walking and women. And it was something that I really started thinking about when I walked the West Highland Way. So that's almost 100 miles. I think it's about 96 miles. But we did it in about 7 days. So you go from the north of Glasgow up to Fort William. Beautiful walk, pretty hilly. And what I saw on the way is there's a lot of people out there walking. There was people that were walking just for the day, just doing short trips. There was younger people, there was older people, there was people that were camping along the way, like all sorts of things. And I realized that a simple activity like walking like this is just important. And that even though you might be starting out that walk, like a walk like I was talking about alone,
Mhm.
you met people along the way. You interacted with people, people who were doing the whole distance. You'd see them one day at lunch, then you'd catch up and they'd be ahead of you. And then you'd see them again a bit later on. It was just a wonderful way to connect, to meet people. Great physical activity and just an opportunity to enjoy things and really take it in. Unlike when you just would make the trip, which we did on the way back in a van where it just goes by in a flash and you don't see anything. When you're walking, you really just experience this whole thing. So it was an absolutely beautiful walk. And I know Scotland is known for maybe not always having the greatest weather, but we had fabulous weather. So it's just a wonderful way to experience. And it made me think about walking and how that's something that we maybe don't value as much as we should. And it's so important for health and well being.
So tell us, how can we incorporate more of that into the advice that we give to older patients?
When we talk about older patients, one of the things you want to do is promote physical activity. That's really good for health, for reducing chronic conditions, and that kind of thing. So that's really important. But I think the piece that we don't often appreciate is that it's particularly important for women, older women. Women are less likely to be physically active than men. And that's something that people may not really think about, but it's something that really does happen quite universally. Why might that be? Is it that physical activity is something that maybe women feel is expensive and women don't always have the same kind of financial resources? Maybe is it related to other kinds of responsibilities that they might have and so they're not able to go out? But I think when you think about that, it's something that you can propose is something that's really accessible and doable for people, especially.
Now, what about some of the evidence or studies that show the benefits of walking in older women?
One of the pieces that we talk about in the article, which I thought was really interesting, was a piece that was done as part of the women's health study. And it looked at the idea of counting steps. And I think we've all heard about this number, this magical number that comes up in our mind. 10,000 steps is
Mhm.
where we have to kind of go. And I think for most people, they think, ooh, that's a bit daunting. That's far. That would take a long time to do. And so maybe people back off. But one of the things that came out of this article, which I thought was really helpful, is that maybe you shouldn't worry about the 10,000 steps. Maybe the idea was that just walking was a good thing. And they even pointed out that walking a lesser amount, so I think the number was something like 4,400 steps, was also relative to people who walked lesser amounts important in terms of reducing major things like mortality. I think one of the messages that comes out from that and from research that's out there is the idea of thinking about walking as something that people can do as they're able to do it, and that different amounts of walking are certainly beneficial, and you shouldn't be worried about thinking that you have to go huge distances, so those small amounts are really important. So I thought that was really important, plus just bringing home the fact that women are less likely to do that or to be physically active than men. And so you want to think about how could you encourage, in particular, women to think about activities like walking.
So let's say you're in the exam room with an older woman, and there are so many issues that you need to get through within a constrained amount of time, yet you want to still encourage walking because of the benefits that you cite. Now, what are some high yield ways where physicians like us can encourage walking when there's just so many other things that we need to handle during a 15 to 20-minute office visit?
You're right, those visits are really short. And in geriatric medicine, we often have the luxury of more time because these issues are really important. But I think what you do want to do is ask people about their physical activity. And especially for women, take advantage of asking a few more questions about that, knowing that they may be less likely to be active. And you might want to think, just briefly ask them, are you walking? And if not, what might some of the barriers be? Is it that they don't feel comfortable doing it? Would it be helpful for them to perhaps meet with a group, to walk with a friend, to build it into part of a routine that they might be having as part of their day? Maybe they're going off towards a coffee shop. They could take the opportunity to work there or to walk there. So I think it might be about first, in your very brief period of time, taking the opportunity to ask about it, And if they're not doing it, think about what some of the barriers might be and what are some of the simple things that might entice people to start thinking about walking. As I've said, it might be having a bit of a destination to go to, building it into part of their daily routine, taking it as an opportunity to connect with family and friends, maybe joining walking groups. Sometimes in cities, they even have like tours that are walking tours that are really interesting to go on. So maybe just proposing a bunch of different opportunities that people might want to think about pursuing.
Now, what about those who have conditions that may preclude them from walking? If they have rheumatologic disease, if they have osteoarthritis, what are some other ways that we can promote physical activity for those where it's a little bit more difficult for them to walk?
Well, I think you're right. Walking is something that not everyone can do, and that's something that we have to think about and recognize that. But it's not always just even about the walking, but it's also the idea of getting out and being able to interact. So maybe people that are not necessarily able to walk on their own, it's the opportunities to be out amongst other people and as an opportunity to socialize. Because one of the other benefits of walking is that you do get those social connections. If you're going, for example, out on a regular basis, you're often passing people along the way. People stop to talk, or you're with a friend and you're talking. During COVID, it was so important to be outdoors. And walking, I think, was getting more popularity as a way that you could safely meet with family and friends without necessarily worrying the same way about transmission of infection. And in similar ways, I think we want to find people who cannot walk. What are some of those opportunities to get that advantage of those social connections, which are also really important?
We're talking to Paula Rochon. She's a geriatrician. Her Kevin MD article is titled Reduce Your Loneliness, Improve Your Well-Being, and Take the First Step. Paula, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I guess one of the things that I think you want to talk about from a sort of a broad perspective, and this goes back to my interest in aging in women. Aging is something that impacts all of us. And people often think of aging as something that's happening over there, but it's something that we all need to think about. And I think we all need to think about what we want to do to promote our health and well-being and that of, those around us. We're about to be in a society where we're a super age society where more than 20% of our population are going to be in that older age group. So this is important. And I've often been asked as a geriatrician and researcher, what can you do to stay well, to age well over time? And I think people are looking, is there a fountain of youth? Is there some pill that I could take that would make a difference? And I don't think there is. You could wait for it, but I don't think there is. And in the meantime, I think there's things that people can do. And I think walking is one of those that's accessible for most people, not all, but it's accessible and something that is very beneficial in terms of improving your health in general and your sense of social connections and therefore well-being in terms of reducing loneliness. And something that's particularly important to think about for women who are less likely to be doing activities like that than men.
Paula, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.